そしてスティーブ・クリスティさんからスピーチをお願いいたします。スティーブさんは2年前にお子さんと会えるようになりましたが、それ以前までは3年間どこに住んでいるかさえも分かりませんでした。皆さんも東京新聞でも写真をご覧になったと思いますが、お二人、息子さんとスティーブさんが写った写真は本当ににこやかで幸福そうなお写真でした。それ以前の会うまでのお子さんとスティーブさんは本当にもう明日にも死にそうな、お二人とも死にそうな顔をしていました。そのことも含めましてスティーブさんからスピーチをお願いしたいと思います。アメリカ大使館にもこの2年間非常に毎月のように抗議をして、ここまでアメリカ大使館が動けるようになったのもスティーブさんのお力もあったと思います。他の外国人の皆様も、本当に日本にいる外国人の皆様がハーグ条約の法改正を動かしたと思っています。アメリカ本国にいるアメリカ人のお父様お母様の皆様もこの日本での動きを察知して行動されたと聞いております。ぜひスティーブさんよろしくお願いします。
どうもありがとうございます。スティーブ・クリスティと申します。よろしくお願いします。最初は英語で話します。でその後できるまで日本語で話します。So, my name is Stephen Christie. I've been living here in Japan for over 10 years. My wife and I came from graduate school in Chicago and started living here in Tokyo. And slowly my wife decided that she didn't want to be together anymore. So we separated. I've been fortunate in that during that time, my son was growing up, and he was 10 years old when my wife decided she wanted to get a divorce. During those previous 10 years, basically I was like a house husband. I worked at a university, so I had a flexible schedule. So I was the one who would come home and take care of my son, make dinner for him, and study with him in the evening and things like that. Eventually, we separated, and I came to find out that my wife was actually being abusive to our son. Eventually, at one point, he decided that he wanted to come and live with me. And so he moved and stayed with me in my apartment. And this was during the summer vacation. And my wife had moved to a new place. And then at that time, when the school started again, and he registered at a new school in my neighborhood, that's when my wife decided to abduct my son. My wife is a shacho. She has her own company, and her schedule is very difficult, and so she typically can't come home until around midnight and things. So she couldn't actually really take care of him. So after she abducted my son, since she couldn't take care of him, she sent him to another family in the Kansai area. Far enough away that he could not come back home by himself. During that time, we had already gone through Chote at the Tokyo Family Court through arbitration, and we were litigating our case. The Tokyo Family Court knew full well that my son was not living with any relatives. They sent an investigator down to the Kansai area to visit this family that he was being held at, and they knew that he wasn't with his father, he wasn't with his mother, he wasn't with his grandparents, he wasn't living with any relatives that he knew. He was just sloughed off on another family. And for 3 years, he had to live with this family. And he had no way of coming back home. He had no way of contacting me because he had forgotten my telephone number. So he was in a very miserable situation. And yet the Tokyo Family Court went along with this and agreed to allow my wife to do this. And ultimately, since she had the child, she was able to get child custody. Since then, we've become divorced. As Mashito said, I'm fortunate in that I was able to find out where my son lived, what family he was living with. And when I found out, they immediately sent him back up to live with his mother. So I feel very lucky that my son was 10 years old when he was abducted. And so we had a very good relationship, and he missed me very much. And despite being gone for 3 years and suffering from PAS, or parental alienation syndrome, we were able to work through that slowly when we were able to get back in contact with each other. Even now though, well actually now he's at a boarding school, again far away from Tokyo, so that my wife tries to keep us away from each other. But he knows my phone number now and we're able to communicate, and that makes it much more bearable not being able to see my son. At least we can communicate though. The problem is that the Tokyo Family Court is not following Japanese law. Japan is a signatory to the UNCRC, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children, and the Japanese Diet has ratified that treaty. So in Japan, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children is actually the highest law in Japan, and it clearly stipulates that a child has a human right to access to both of their parents. And yet, the Tokyo Family Court, knowing that one parent has abducted the child, and in fact, in my case, the child is not even with any family members, they still abide and allow the abducting parent to maintain this situation, which is a violation of their human rights. This is the kind of thing that needs change. Most recently last year, Christopher Savoy's children were abducted from the United States and brought to Japan. That's a violation of the Hague Treaty on the civil aspects of international parental child abduction. And again, Japan has not returned the children back to the United States. Japan is not a signatory to the Hague Convention. That's why in the past year there's been 3 joint demarches. The first one with 12 countries. There were 2, one with the Minister of Justice and one with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then most recently, the EU as well joined in. So now more than 20 countries are calling upon Japan to sign on to and ratify the Hague Convention to prevent these international child abductions. But by far the biggest problem is the domestic cases here in Japan. My heart really goes out to the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Japanese children, of Japanese marriages, who have not been able to see both of their parents. This was a picture of my son when he was 10 years old, when he was abducted. And at that time, I thought I was the only person in the world who could be going through this. I couldn't imagine that there's no joint custody in this country. Kyoto Shinken ganai, wakaru nakata. The first inkling that there was a problem here was when this issue of Metropolis magazine came out, telling about the second Canadian symposium on parental child abduction. And then I realized that this problem is much bigger than just me and my wife. It was at that time that I was able to meet with representatives from the U.S. Embassy, and then we started regular meetings at the embassy, and which has led to these joint demarches in other countries coming on as well. So, to all of you out there, I just ask, please talk to your Diet members, to your local representatives. Ask them, please, as soon as possible, sign on to the Hague Convention, change the domestic family law in Japan to recognize joint custody for the sake of the children. The children are the ones who are suffering here, and they suffer lifelong consequences because of this. Thank you. Okay. Okay. ちょっと日本語でします。僕は東京に10年間ぐらい住んでました。で、その時僕は本当にハウスハズバンドでした。で、毎日仕事後帰りましたと息子と晩ご飯作った一緒に食べた塾の学ぶことを一緒にしましたし、小5年生の時に妻は離婚したいと分かりました。で、東京家庭裁判所で離婚することをしました。で、夏休みの時に妻は息子を拉致しました。彼女は社長ので 子供をお世話になる、よくできないので、別のファミリー、息子は別のファミリー一緒に住んでた。
大阪。
そう、いや、大阪のファミリー一緒に、10歳ので、東京だったら自分で帰ることができますので、すごく遠いのファミリー一緒に住んでた。そう、だから大阪のファミリー一緒に住んでた。そう、3年間この間にどこに住んでるか分からなかった。でも東京家庭裁判所そんなことしてました。パパ一緒にママ一緒におじさんの、一緒にじゃなくて、別のファミリー一緒に住んでた。そのことはUnited Nations Convention on the Rights of Children UNCRC の法律には不法です。でも日本にはサインしました。国会でratify なんというそう何？批准。国会は批准しました。だからそのすることは不法と思います。でも東京裁判所で OK でした。3年後どのファミリー分かりました。もうすぐその後ファミリーケント息子はケントというケント君は東京に帰りました。だからだんだん会いました。だんだんもっとよくリレーションになりました。最近良かったです。一緒にじゃなくて今北海道の寮に住んでます。けど時々会うことができますし、毎週ぐらい電話で話しますのことあるし、じゃあ本当に問題は子供は、離婚の時にどっちか親会うことができません。そう子供たちは本当にかわいそうです。そう皆さん、助けてください。国会に話してください。日本の、法律、家庭法律、共同親権になることいります。子供たちだから。どうも。
ありがとうございました。ありがとうございました。今のスピーチの中でもですね、小学校5年生から3年間も別な家族の大阪にいる別な人に預けられたんですね、健人君は。普通だったら両親のどちらかにいればまだいいんですけども、母親の方がですね、会社